Good evening. It is good to see everyone tonight. Looks like we've got a good number here tonight, and the singing has been outstanding tonight. So we enjoy that and appreciate being with brethren to sing praises to the Lord. Before I begin, I want to mention a couple of things. Number one is we've got a table out here in the foyer that has material from the Gospel Broadcasting Network. It has a number of different DVDs on various subjects. All of that material is free. We would be delighted for you to pick that up. I think there are some newsletters and some wristbands and some different things, but everything there is free, and it tells you about the work that we're doing at GBN. We never have a month pass that we don't have conversions. It is a very effective work, and if you're interested in finding about what we're doing, ask me, or we would be glad to direct you to our website. In fact, if you have a mobile device such as an iPhone or an Android or a tablet, go and download the GBN app. It is a very, very good app. It has material, commentaries on every book of the Bible in a video form. We're just about ready to roll out where we're going to have written commentaries on almost every book of the Bible. And it is good, sound material, and they're going to be free to anyone who wants to use them because we're trying to put good material in people's hands. We've also got our podcast there, the Answering the Error program that we do. We take videos that are submitted by viewers that relate to error, and we play them, and we stop them, and we analyze them in light of the Bible. So search for the Gospel Broadcasting Network. You will find that app very helpful, and I'll tell you some more about the work we're doing as the week goes on. Sounds like y'all have got some great meetings going in this area this week and some good speakers, and it's always unfortunate when they conflict with one another, but we're supportive of good work no matter where it goes on. One other thing that I need to do, and I'll go ahead and get this out of the way, and this is a picture of my granddaughter. Her name is Ellie Mae. And when my daughter named her that, told us she was going to name her that, I said, my daughter's name is Macy. I said, Macy, you know what everyone's going to think. And she said, what? And I said, the TV show? And she said, Andy Griffith? And I said, no, the Beverly Hillbillies. And she said, Dad, only old people will think that. And so if you thought that, then that says something about you. Tonight, the lesson is entitled The Frailty of Life, and I'm going to tell you about the accident that I experienced a few years ago and about some things that I have learned. Some of this is material that I presented at Polishing the Pulpit immediately after the accident, and some of it relates to experiences that I've had since then in the last 3 years. But there have been some deep spiritual truths that have come from this and that I think can help people as we can share in the suffering that we have been through. This is always a difficult lesson for my wife. I've gotten to the point in the early days I could not deliver this lesson without breaking down. I've gotten now where I can do it. I continue to do it because I think there's benefit for other people in hearing this. And so much tragedy has come from the story. If good can come from it, I certainly want that to be the case. A little over 3 years ago, I started a gospel meeting in Salem, Virginia at the West Side Church of Christ. Brother Eddie Gilpin was the preacher there at the time. Sherry and I arrived on Saturday night, and it was going to be a fun week. We were getting to the point that we were empty nesters and our children were grown, and she was going to start traveling on meetings with me, and so we had preaching and fellowship, and so I preached the next day, and when we finished that Sunday, Sherry and I left and we went out to Cracker Barrel to eat, and I got my phone out, and you know we document everything nowadays, and I thought she looked pretty sitting there, so I took a picture of it. We went back to the hotel room. The next day, Eddie and his wife Jeannie, it was May the 6th, Monday, May the 6th, they invited us to go to their house for lunch. And they told us we were going to be going to a little cafe that was nearby. And so we were expecting a restaurant. And so After we had talked for a while, they invited us to go outside and get on the four-wheelers. And I thought, where in the world are we going to eat that we're going on four-wheelers? What kind of country hick place are we in here? So anyway, we went out and we started riding, and they took us out on their farm to what they called a cafe that they had set up under the trees ready to go. And it was a great lunch. It was very nice out there, and we enjoyed a good meal. When we got through eating, they said, would you like to take a tour of our property? And we said yes, we would very much like to do that. And so we got on the four-wheelers. Eddie and Jeannie were on one four-wheeler out front. Sherry and I were on the second four-wheeler following them. We got up to the top of the hill. You can't tell it here, but this is a hill that is going down. We got up to the top of the hill, and I got out my phone and took a picture. Eddie said, would you like me to take a picture of you and Sherry? And I said, sure. And I did not know that this would be the last picture that was taken just minutes before the accident occurred. We started down the hill, and I go blank. I don't remember anything for, I guess, a day or two after that. But what I'm told happened is, as we're going down the hill, Eddie and Jeannie were ahead of us. We were behind them. And at some point, we hit something. We think maybe it was a dip. We never could find it. But the four-wheeler flipped 4 times. Sherry flew off in one direction, and she was injured. Most people aren't aware of that, but she sustained a back injury. I apparently stayed on it and flipped, and it doubled me over and broke my back in half. And so Eddie heard it. He jumped off of his four-wheeler, and he came back, and I had severed my spinal cord. When he got to me, I was unconscious, and he thought I was dead. Sherry said from a distance she could hear Eddie calling my name, but I wasn't responding. She said she was praying to God that I wasn't dead or brain damaged. After a bit, I came to. I still don't remember any of this, but Eddie said that I began to say, I can't feel my legs. And Sherry said she could hear me groaning in the distance. My speech was slurred. I was hurting. I was saying that I can't breathe. Please move me. Please lift me. But of course, Eddie told me he wouldn't do it because, he was scared he might hurt me. They called an ambulance. It took a long time for the ambulance to get out there to the country. When the ambulance got there, they realized that it was beyond their capabilities, and they called for a helicopter. The helicopter got me and flew me to the nearby hospital in Roanoke. They determined that I had a broken back, a broken sternum, a cracked C1 vertebrae at the base of my skull in multiple places, and that I had a severed spinal cord. They operated and they fused 5 vertebrae together. In fact, if you look, here is an MRI of my spinal cord. If you look at it, you can see that it literally is broken in half. They put it back together with rods. In fact, here's a shot that you can see the rods that are in my back after the surgery to give you an idea of some of the hardware that I have in me now. When I woke up, it's the first thing I remember. The last thought was we were riding down the mountain. All was good. I woke up in the hospital utterly confused, and I asked the doctor, where am I? And he said, you're in the hospital. And I said, why? And he said, you were in an accident. And after we talked for a minute, it occurred to me, I can't move. I can't feel my legs. And he explained that I had severed my spinal cord. And so I asked him, will I ever walk again? And he said, we can't say for sure, but probably not. I thought it was a dream. Do you ever have one of those dreams that you have this terrible experience and you go to sleep and you'll wake up later and it's okay? Well, I had that happen. I was still groggy, and so I went to sleep. I woke up a little bit later, and it was still that way. And I went back to sleep, and probably for 24 hours that kept happening to me until I woke up and got my cognitive functions back enough that I realized this is real. And it was absolutely devastating. After a few days, I was airlifted to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where I spent the next 2.5 months in rehab. In fact, here, this was a shot of me. I don't know who took this one, but this was, I guess this was in the hospital in Roanoke after the accident. This was in Shepherd Center in Atlanta. You can see some of the rehab I was going through. You can tell by the look on my face that it was painful rehab. Rehab oftentimes is painful. Just after I was released from the hospital, I can't remember how long, but it was a few days afterwards, the directors of Polishing the Pulpit asked if I would come and talk about my experience, and I agreed to do that. And this was the forum. Someone took this from behind. It was very difficult. I was extremely emotional at the time. I was having spasms pretty severely, and I don't think anyone was aware of that, so I was having a difficult time just holding it together, but I really wanted to do it. It's been 3 years now. What I want to do tonight is this. I want to talk to you about some things that I've learned, some of the experiences that I've had. I'm going to make some observations and some applications, and then I'm going to talk about some benefits that actually come from suffering. And then I'm going to make some suggestions for getting through tragedy, some of the things that have helped me in the last 3 years. First, I want to make some observations and some applications. The first one is this: God uses broken people. You know, it is the case for me, before the accident, I was a very confident person. I felt like I could accomplish anything. I felt unstoppable. After the accident, I was filled with doubt. I became very self-conscious. I told Sherry, I will never be offered a good preaching job again. Who wants to hire a paraplegic? But you know, something that I have learned is that God uses broken people. Think about this. Moses says that he was slow of speech, probably means he stuttered. David, he had all sorts of family problems. Rehab was a prostitute. Naomi was a broken widow. She said, call me bitter. Joseph was abused by his brothers. Abraham was old. Paul said that, you know, he was a Pharisee who killed Christians. He said that I'm the chief of sinners. I could go on and on. But what we must not do is become like the one-talent man and become afraid and hide our talent in the ground because we think that we're small. A wise, older Christian who had experienced a great deal of tragedy himself said to me, Don, nobody has a greater witness than one who is broken. Now, he didn't mean witness in the denominational sense. What he meant is when you have gone through these things. In fact, let me illustrate what he meant. Do you remember what God, when he was having a conversation with Satan, and they were talking about Job in Job chapter 1 and verse 9? Do you remember what the verse says? Does Job fear God for nothing? That's what the devil said to him. He said, have you not made a hedge around him and his household and around him on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the lands. But now you stretch out your hand against him and touch him, and surely he will curse you to his face. That's what he was saying is, he serves you only because things are good. You take away the things that he has, and he will walk away from you. Brethren, when hard times come, and they will, for all of us, when hard times come, we need to be sure that we magnify God's name by our faithfulness. Here's a second thing I have learned, and that is that grief has no timeline. When I was in the hospital, I received approximately 2,800 cards. I know that because my mom and dad were there with me every single day, and my dad was bored and he counted every single card that came in. And he had the idea. He thought, why don't we take every card and put it on the walls and just plaster the walls? We got to the point that we didn't have a space left on the walls, and we had to start putting them in a box. In fact, I found this picture later that represented just a small sampling of cards that were there. The man in the mailroom said he had never seen anything like it in all the years that he had worked there. Someone I remember came in and said, "Are you somebody famous?" And I said, "I'm a Christian." I said, "That's what Christians do for one another." I was in the hospital with Kenny Rogers. Kenny Rogers passed away not long ago, but while I was in the hospital, I met Kenny Rogers and talked to him. Very interesting man, but someone observed to me, they said, "Kenny Rogers didn't even receive as many cards as you." And I said, Kenny Rogers was not a Christian. We tried to do something about that while we were there, but unsuccessful. When I got home, cards kept coming. When we got to about 4,000 cards, they slowly stopped. That's natural. But the grief didn't stop. In fact, the grief got worse. When I got home, I could not get my wheelchair under my desk because it had some things up under it for the tray, and it was frustrating to me. I tried to get my file cabinet, and I couldn't reach, and it was frustrating. I couldn't reach my books, and at one point I just wanted to throw my hands up and say, I can't do anything. I tried to get into my truck. I had purchased a brand new blue Toyota Tacoma before I had the accident, just shortly before, and I got home, I could not get in the truck. And it just broke my heart because I loved my truck. So many of the physical pleasures that I had were taken away. Sherry and I used to walk the neighborhood together for fun. I couldn't do that with her. And you know what really hurt me was my ability to help other people. All through the years, Sherry and I at the time had been married 28 years, I think, and all through the years, I always pumped the gas. She rarely ever put gas in her car for 28 years, and I couldn't do that anymore. Just carrying things for other people. I remember being in an airport, and I saw someone drop their suitcase, and I went to jump to pick it up, and I realized I couldn't move. Helping people move their furniture, painting, doing repairs, things that I could not deal with anymore. And then there was the regiment of approximately 25 pills a day to deal with pain and muscle spasms. I won't even begin to go into all the physical issues that are involved. But where am I going with this? The cards stopped, but life moves on. You go back to work. People don't really want to hear about your pain all the time. So what you do is you put on a happy face and you do the best that you can. And then there's a loneliness that comes with it because nobody really understands what you're going through unless they've been there. And when you look around for other Christian paraplegics, there aren't many of those out there. And so when you find one, you feel this kinship of, you know what I'm going through. But brethren, it made me realize this. There are brethren all around the world who are experiencing things like that. There are widows, those who have lost their spouse, and it made me realize they go through the same thing. After the funeral, they have people that are around them and their house is full and they're remembered and mentioned in the prayers, and over the next few months, those things stop, but their grief doesn't stop. Those who have lost children, it goes on. I guess maybe it softens through the years, but it never goes away. That's with you the rest of your life. And I thought about the people around me that are suffering, and it made me realize these things last for years. And it's something I hadn't thought about before, is that people are suffering and they're all putting on that happy face. And if you haven't experienced it yet, more than likely it's just going to be a matter of time. If you live long enough, these things are going to hit you. Sherry and I talked about this. In almost 30 years of marriage, we had just had a rosy life. Everything had gone great. Our kids were great. Our marriage was great. I'd had good experiences preaching the gospel. And in about a 2-year period, her mother died of ALS, her dad died of cancer, and I had this accident. And I felt like Job, like the world was just raining down on me. Let me say something about the will of God. Since the accident, I have repeatedly had people say to me things like this, well, Don, it happened for a reason, or it's God's will, or words to that effect. Brethren, I don't believe that for a minute. And if we are not careful, we get dangerously close to Calvinism and suggesting that God causes everything to happen. The fact of the matter is, God has given us free will, and He allows us to suffer the consequences of our actions. You know, maybe some drunk driver will hit some little child in an accident and kill that little baby or that little toddler, and you go to the funeral and some well-meaning person will say to the parents, God must have wanted him in heaven. You ever heard somebody say that at a funeral? I have. No wonder people get angry at God. That wasn't God's will to kill that little baby. As a matter of fact, oftentimes it's a drunk driver, and it was a violation of God's will that took that baby. You know, we need to be very careful and understand that not everything that happens is God's will. Now, that doesn't mean that God can't use it. You know, after my accident, we went home. I couldn't use the regular bathroom facilities because now when I shower, I have to have a special shower chair because I can't stand up. I can't hold myself up. And in the beginning, I had a stool. So I'd have to sit on this shower stool, and with one hand, I'd have to hold my body up, and with the other hand, I would have to wash. That wasn't very good, and so we got a shower chair. With this shower chair, I had to convert the shower so that I could roll in. So we employed a group of men, contractors, to come and redo the bathroom. In the process of that, I was talking to the 4 men, and we actually taught the gospel and converted all 4 of these contractors. It was such a great thing. Since then, I've learned that they haven't all remained faithful, but the man in the orange shirt here, he went back home in Mississippi, and he's become very faithful. He is teaching. He's been converting people. He has become a leader in that congregation. He has even talked about going to a school of preaching, and just this last month, he baptized his daughter into Christ. Now, did the Lord providentially use that? Yes, I believe He did. I don't believe He caused it, but I believe that He used it. Next, I got to get moving here. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. Of course, that's Philippians 1:21. I've known that verse as long as I can remember. Verse 23, Paul said, for I am hard pressed between 2 things. The King James says, I am in a strait betwixt 2. We don't talk that way, but he means I'm torn between 2 things. Having the desire to depart and be with the Lord, listen, which is far better, he says. But he says it's better for the church that I stay. So I'm torn. Do I want to be here for the sake of the church, or go be with the Lord, which is far better? Now, that doesn't mean we should be suicidal, but brethren, do we believe that? Do we really believe to die is gain? Now, we as Christians need to let that sink in, and it will forever change your perspective. We don't want to get to the point that we put physical life over spiritual life. I'm afraid maybe during the pandemic, we might have slipped into that a little bit. We can't put physical life over spiritual life. To live is Christ, and to die, well, I'm better off if I'm a Christian. Here's the next one. I want to say something about the benefits of suffering. Number 1, it teaches us to pray. Brethren, I will admit to you that in the last 3 years, at least in the beginning, I struggled with my prayer life. And the reason I did is because I felt like God wasn't answering me. I begged the Lord when I was in the hospital. My family would be there with me all day. At night they would leave. I would be lying in the bed alone, and I would have time that was private, and I would pray. And I remember one night I got my phone and I went on Facebook and I asked, brethren, please pray that I will walk again. Please pray that I will show improvement. And I begged God. I laid there in the bed begging Him like I've never begged before. And day after day passed and month after month went by. Nothing changed. The pain was still there. And the emotional pain is worse than the physical pain, I'm telling you. It caused me to dig in and study prayer unlike I had ever studied it before. And I've continued to grow as I've studied prayer. You know, something that's helped me is 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7. Paul said, "And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelation, a thorn in the flesh was given me." I don't know what the thorn in the flesh is. No one does. There's speculation. Was it a physical problem? Was it the Judaizing teachers? Was it the brethren? I don't know what it was, but he had some problem, a thorn in the flesh. He says it was a messenger of Satan that was given, he says, to buffet him, lest he should be exalted above measure by the abundance of revelation. He seems to be saying, if I'm understanding that right, because of the revelation, because of the spiritual gifts I have, it could be that I could get full of myself. I could be exalted. But this thing, he said, didn't come from the Lord. It's a messenger of Satan. He said, concerning this thing, I prayed the Lord, I pleaded with God 3 times that it might depart from me. That is, I prayed repeatedly to God, but the answer was no. Brethren, when I think about the Apostle Paul praying, and the answer was no. Why was the answer no? The Lord said, in essence, it's for your good. You know, I'm not going to remove this because I'm looking out for you. There is benefit that I not remove this. I think about Luke 22 and verse 41. The Bible says he kneeled down to pray, saying, "Father, if it is your will, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel appeared to him from heaven, strengthening him, and being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat was, as it were, great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Mark 14:39 says, and again he went and prayed the same words. Matthew 26:44 says, and he left them, and he went again, and he prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Brethren, this is the prayer of the Lord, exhibiting the cry of his humanity for deliverance. He prayed it earnestly. He prayed it in agony. He prayed it repeatedly. But the answer was no. Why? Because the will of the Father needed to be done. And this is what it brought to my mind. Could it be that there are times in which I am praying for relief, praying that my suffering would end, but there's something more important than my pain? Could it be that there are souls that need to be reached and can be reached if I will remain in this situation? With Paul, the Lord knew that there was something greater. With Jesus Christ, God's plan was going to be accomplished. I'm thinking about ending my pain, and the Lord is looking at opportunities. Maybe there's someone searching for the truth, and providentially, I will provide a way for them to learn. Maybe there is a hard heart that can only be opened by my situation because of me. I would like to recommend to you Brother Dan Winkler's book, Something Happened When I Prayed. It has helped me. In this particular book, he talks about first the fact that when you pray, the Father inclines His ear towards you. You read this in Psalm 86. The Hebrew word here for inclines His ear carries with it the idea of stretching out, bowing, or bending toward. The idea is when I'm praying, God is leaning toward me and listening to me. When I pray, the Son of God sits at the right hand of the throne of God, making intercession for me, Hebrews 7:25. He defends me. He speaks on my behalf as one who has been where I am. The Holy Spirit intercedes for me at the throne of God, Romans chapter 8, 26 and 27. Brethren, when I pray, I started envisioning what was going on in heaven, the Father leaning toward me, the role of the Son, the Holy Spirit interceding for me, and it began to give me the most confidence that I have ever had in prayer. Secondly, a benefit of prayer is that it humbles us. This entire experience has humbled me. Before this accident, I was very strong physically. I was well off financially, not rich, but well off. I had control of my life. At work, I was the boss. When everything is going your way, it's easy to get full of yourself. It is easy to become self-sufficient, but an accident like this makes you realize how much you depend on God. A whole team of highly skilled doctors could not do anything about my situation. And it made me realize how much I depended on God. This accident humbled me in ways I have never been humbled. I watched at the time, my dad is nearly 80. I watched him while we were in the hospital, picking up my lame body and moving me around, carrying me around. I'm telling you, that's humbling. You know, I have had several occasions where my wheelchair would be coming down the ramp and it would hit a rock or something at the end and it would throw my body out on the ground. At GBN one day, I was coming down the ramp. I hit a rock. It threw me out on the ground. The pavement was hot. I was laying in the gravel. It tore my pants. My leg is bleeding, and there was no one around that could get me up. And I saw one of my coworkers come into the parking lot, and I yelled for him, and he came back there. Aaron Gallagher, he's 6'4", big fella, and so he wrapped his arms around me and picked my body up and put me back in the chair. I know it shouldn't be, but it's humiliating when something like that happens. James 4:6 says, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. No, it's not the same thing. Spiritual humility and physical, they're a different type of thing, but I'm telling you, this sort of thing can break down your pride. Next, it makes us sympathetic toward others. Romans 12:15, weep with those that weep. Genesis chapter 5 and Galatians 5 and verse 22 lists for us the fruits of the Spirit, one of which is kindness. One thing that this injury has done is to make me more patient with other people. I want to perpetually be kind to other people. For instance, it used to be if someone would pull out in front of me and they would drive really slowly, I would think, get out of my way. What is your problem going so slow? Now I get to thinking, maybe they have a wheelchair in the back like I do. Because you pull out and you're trying to be slow so that you don't sling your wheelchair all over the place. It's made me think about, and I want to reach out, and I feel for people that have lost a spouse, that have lost a child, that have struggled with cancer, even people who are divorcees, have had a miscarriage. Brethren, we are surrounded by people who are hurting, and it made me realize I'm not alone in that sense. We have different types of hurting, but the emotional pain might be just as bad for each one, some worse than what I've gone through. Next, suffering purifies us. Now, what do I mean by that? When you realize how close you came to dying, it made me stop and search my life for shortcomings and sin to realize I blanked out and I opened my eyes in the hospital. What if I had blanked out and opened my eyes in eternity? I was riding along, we were having a fun day, and just like that, bam, it was over. No warning, nothing. Who's to say you won't leave here tonight and have something like that? 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, examine yourselves whether you are in the faith, test yourselves. That doesn't mean whether you are in the faith in the sense that you're Christian, because this was written to Christians. This means, are you in the faith? Are you walking in the light? Examine yourself, Christian. Psalm 119 and verse 67, David said that he went astray before he was afflicted. In verse 71, he said, it's good for me that I've been afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. What is he saying? Because of the suffering, it's made me look at myself and it's made me examine my life. It's a benefit. How do I get through these things? I'm just going to share with you some things that I've learned in the last 3 years. I've had folks say to me, I don't know how you do it. I would just curl up in my house and just not do anything. Brethren, you do it because you have to do it. You don't have a choice. Here's the first thing that I have learned that helps me. This is hard. but don't live in the past. Listen to this very interesting passage from Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Ecclesiastes 7:10 says, "Do not say, 'Why were the former days better than these?' For you do not inquire wisely concerning this." Do not say, "Why were the former days better than these?" He says that's not a wise thing to ask. One of the greatest torments that I have found is living in the past. When I sit and contemplate how good it used to be before the accident, it takes me to bad places. And it can be almost anything. I loved just walking around the yard after I'd cut the grass and just smelling the fresh grass, and now I can't get out and get around the yard. And that's troubling. Even things like jumping out and pumping the gas when it's freezing cold and Sherry's sitting inside and the wind's blowing and I was so miserable, I miss doing that. I have found living in the past is a tormentor for me. You know, some people do that even with regard to their sin. They just beat themselves up over things they did in the past and they can't move on. But you know, the thing about the past is it's in the past and you can't change it. I don't know if I've had one single day in the last 3 years that I have not thought to myself, if I could only go back and live that day over again, I wouldn't have done that. If I could only have done this differently, if I had not taken that gospel meeting, I don't know why I can't stop thinking it. I don't know if I've had one single day when I don't think that. And that is a tormentor. You can't live in the past. You've got to pick up where you are. Philippians 3 and verse 13, Paul said, "This one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind me and reaching forth to those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of our God, which is in Christ Jesus." Paul certainly had some things in his past that could have tormented him. You know, some could be good things from the past, and you so glory in them, you don't move on to the future. Some can be bad things. Let me move on for the sake of time here. Next, we need to count our blessings. How do we get through tragedy? Brethren, we got to count our blessings. Like the song says, count your many blessings, name them one by one. It will surprise you what the Lord has done. Psalm 103 and verse 2, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not His benefits." You know what that means? Count your many blessings. Some days I find myself thinking, I have it worse than anybody. I'm a paraplegic. If I could begin to even tell you the things that I go through, and then I sit back and I think, you know, I've got it better than anybody. I'm a Christian, and I've got a good wife, and I have a job, I can still preach, and I start counting my blessings, and when I do those things, it changes my perspective. They told me in the hospital that many people's spouses leave them when something like this occurs because they'll say, I didn't sign up for this, I'm out of here. My wife has been with me every step of the way. See, it's a matter of perspective. So much of life is what we do with our minds. You know, it makes me think of Numbers chapter 11. God had rescued the children of Israel from Egypt. He had given them food from heaven. He was caring for them. But listen to their attitude. Numbers 11 and verse 4, they said, "Who will give us meat to eat? We remember," they're living in the past, "the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, and the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up, and there is nothing except this manna that God gave us. We wish we had those good things that we had in the past. All we have now is God taking care of us and giving us these blessings." One thing I know is when I stop counting my bruises and I count my blessings, it always makes me feel better, and it changes my perspective. Getting through tragedy, I need to remember why I am here. I want to read you a quote from Jane McWhorter in her book, Let This Cup Pass. She wrote this after she had been involved in a very tragic automobile accident. She said, "We are here to prepare ourselves for life after death. It doesn't really matter whether you live 50 years or 100 years. Neither does it matter whether those years are carefree or filled with sorrow. The only consideration of lasting importance is where will we spend eternity? You see, we get to thinking, oh, I'm so unhappy because I miss my truck, or I miss the little physical pleasures that I have, and I miss fill in the blank, and it depresses me. And I'm afraid that we all too often have fallen into the trap of thinking those things are why we are here. To fix up my house, to take a vacation, to have a motorcycle, to have a boat, to be happy, to be entertained all the time. And when I don't have those things, I am miserable. I've got to remember that's not why I'm here in the first place. I've got to remember John 9:4, Jesus said, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. That's why I'm here. How much time did Jesus spend on his yacht? How much time did Jesus spend taking camel tours with his buddies, or fishing for the big bass to mount on his wall? Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to do those things. I'm just saying that's not why we're here. And we've got to not lose our focus. And so I remember that, and as a result of that, I learned not that those things are bad, but that's not what my life is all about. Ecclesiastes 12:13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Here's the last one. Christianity makes all the difference. I remember one day I was in the hospital. In fact, it was Father's Day, 2019, and my youngest daughter and her husband came to visit. And when they left, I was very sad. You know the empty feeling when the family leaves and you're there alone, and it was just amplified in that situation. And I have an iPhone, and the iPhone does this strange thing. It will stitch together your memories, and it sends you a little video. I don't know why it does that. I don't know how to turn it off, but it popped up and it said, you have a memory. I was curious and I hit it. And it showed me a video of a Disney trip that my family had together. Great memories, which really hurts me what they've done with Disney these days. But I saw this video and I saw this picture, and it brought me low. And I couldn't hold it together. I remember rolling over in the hospital bed and just holding myself, trying to not let Sherry see me crying and how torn up that I was. In fact, here was the picture that I saw. And I thought, I'll never stand like that again, and wrap my arms around my family. And I thought, how am I going to go on? I can't live like this. And then I thought to myself, I'm a Christian. And then I thought, this is all temporary. And then I'm going to die, and I'm going to go to heaven. And then I got to thinking about all of the other people in the hospital, and it made me think, that's misery. Can you imagine living a life as a paraplegic or a quadriplegic and dying and being lost? Or being a healthy person and dying and being lost? Friends, if that doesn't put things in perspective, I have a mission, and I want to reach people with the gospel, whether I am a 1-talent man or a 2-talent man or a 5-talent man or a 2-talent man who used to be a 5-talent man. I've got to use whatever talents I do have to reach souls and to magnify the name of the Lord. If I could trade all of my earthly possessions, my house, my car, all the money that I have in the bank, if someone guaranteed me you can give it all up and be unemployed tomorrow, homeless, jobless, just your wife and your family, but you'll be able to walk again, I would do it in a blink of an eye and not even stop to think about it. I'd trade anything. But there's one thing that I would not trade, and that is my soul. Matthew 16:26, our Lord said, "For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and yet lose his soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul. Friends, this evening, no matter what you've been through in this world, there's a world to come, and it's not that far away. One day soon, we're all going to be facing it, whether the Lord comes again or we pass from this life. And the only thing that's going to matter is, have you prepared your soul for eternity? I know I've gone long tonight, but let me conclude with this. In order to be prepared, you need to have obeyed the gospel. You need to be a member of that one church we talked about this morning that was purchased by the blood of Jesus. The way you do that is by hearing, believing, repenting, confessing, and being baptized. If you don't know what that means, you can get a copy of this morning's lesson, or we'll sit down and have a study with you about that. Maybe you're here tonight, you want to obey the gospel. We're ready to assist you. Maybe you're a Christian who needs the prayers of your brethren, and we would be honored to go to God and do that tonight. This evening, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, won't you come? As together we stand and sing the invitation song.